Welcome to Beyond the Press Release, a production of AGORACOM, in which we take the time to speak with small-cap executives about recent, important press releases. With us today is Frank Drohan. He's President, Chairman, and CEO of Omagine, Inc., trades in the U.S. under the stock symbol OMAG, and you can find them on the web under omagine.com. Now, for those of you who are new to the Omagine story, and I imagine there are lots of you out there who are watching this for the first time, Omagine, through its 60% owned subsidiary, Omagine LLC, is a developer of a $2.5 billion real estate project in Oman. It's going to sit on 245 acres of beachfront land that faces the Gulf of Oman, just west of the capital city of Muscat. Now, more than just lip service, the company made this announcement on October 2nd, and I'm quoting the headline: Omagine signs multi-billion-dollar agreement with Oman. Now, investors are going to be happy to know that given the magnitude of both the deal, the news, and the project going forward, that we'll be broadcasting a series of these kind of interviews over the coming weeks and months, but this is the first one. Frank, welcome to the show.
Hey, Josh. Great to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Well, first of all, before we get into questions, on behalf of all your loyal shareholders, I want to congratulate you and your team, both in the U.S. and Oman, for getting this deal done. Years in the making, unbelievable magnitude. How do you and all your executives feel about this recent success?
People are just thrilled, George. I mean, you know how much time it took. We thought it would take 2 or 3 years, and it took a lot longer than that. But everybody's thrilled, and we're anxious to get going and developing it now. You know?
You're the multi-year overnight success story. One of my favorite quotes.
Yeah, but it was a big number, so it's worth it. You know?
All right, so this is a massive deal. Lots of moving parts. The details which we're going to get from both this interview and subsequent interviews in the coming weeks and months, because we can't cover everything. However, the first thing I want to address before we get into some of the details is the too good to be true syndrome, because a lot of people have seen this news. Here you are, a small OTC QB company announcing this kind of deal. What is it that you want people to know about how real this deal is?
Well, you know, George, first of all, I would sympathize with a lot of these people, because we all know that there are instances where people overstate things. But believe me, all one has to do, if you have the time and the desire, is to go back over our 10Ks and our 10Qs and our audited financial statements for the last many years. And you will find that we are incredibly transparent. I mean, we name names, and we name the ministers and the people that we talk to in the government. I mean, we name who our partners are, for instance. I think it's instructive to step back, actually, and look at what it is that we tried to do here and how we tried to orchestrate it. Essentially, we took control of this small public company and used it as a vehicle to launch this project. And we brought in really incredibly great consultants and some key management people. We raised money, and we did really unusual things, but we did it within the auspices of this very small, as you said, OTC company. Hopefully it'll be a NASDAQ company very soon. But the point I'm trying to make is it's understandable how people could have this reaction, but if you read these reports, I mean, we're filing these with the SEC, so we don't fool around with them. You know, we're very careful. Look at who our partners are. I mean, in addition to our shareholders in the U.S., we formed this company in Oman under the U.S. Free Trade Agreement, owned 100% of it initially. And then we sold 40% of it to 2 people, 2 entities, 1 person, 1 entity. The first one is the ruler, Sultan Qaboos, the ruler of Oman. He owns 25% of Omagine LLC. The second company, second person that owns 15%, is a company called Consolidated Contractors International out of Athens, Greece, a $5.5 billion multinational construction and oil company, probably the 2nd or 3rd largest construction company in the Middle East. They have offices in every country in the Middle East. $5.5 billion in revenue, 125,000 employees, run and owned by the Samar Khoury family, who I know for years. I go back years with the Khouris, as does Sam Hamdan, who was the right-hand guy for me here in this. So, look, it is what it is. I'm sorry I shocked you, George, but we pulled it off, and we put together the talent and the money and the creative juice and we made it happen. And people will find out over time. People, because what will happen is we'll execute and deliver. That's the test. So I'm sorry to go on for so long, but
no, that's perfect. I think it's important for people to actually
look
hear
at
you say that and watch you say that.
These kind of companies, you have to bet on the jockey, not on the horse. And if you look at the kinds of people that we brought to the table here, I think it will serve us and our shareholders very well. So,
yeah, that's a question almost to address the new and prospective people who hadn't heard about Omagine until that monster headline come out. A lot of us have been around this company for multiple years. So let's get further into the deal here. I think the biggest questions outside of is this too good to be true, which you've addressed and makes perfect sense. You're naming specific government officials, dates, meeting agendas, so there's no doubt about that. Everyone goes look at just the 8Ks in 2014. I've never seen detail like that. But let's get a little deeper now from the real serious investors, current and prospective. You have two lines of questioning here, which is first to trying to understand the structure and then the valuation. But let's talk about the structure first, specifically the land contributed by the ruler of Oman. How does that work? Who owns the land? What rights does Omagine LLC have over it?
Okay. So if you don't mind, George, I just want to back up one step further because I've noticed from reading your board that people sometimes get confused between Omagine LLC and Omagine Inc. Omagine Inc. is the parent company, the holding company. It's the public company. It has 16 million shares outstanding and 2,000 shareholders. That company has a subsidiary called Omagine LLC, which is an Omani based in the Sultanate of Oman. We own 60% of that subsidiary. That subsidiary is the company that signed the deal just now with the Sultanate of Oman through the Ministry of Tourism. Okay? I just wanted to say that because I notice that every once in a while people get confused. Okay, about the land. So what happens, as I said earlier, I think I mentioned, we formed first this subsidiary, Omagine LLC, and we owned 100% of it. And then we sold 25% to His Majesty, Sultan Qaboos, and we sold 15% to CCC. How did that transaction occur? We signed a shareholder agreement, a legally binding shareholder agreement, and everybody signed it. And the Royal Court Affairs Office on behalf of His Majesty, CCC on behalf of the subsidiaries. And in that transaction, His Majesty, CCC is going to come up with eventually $50 million in equity, and for their 15%. His Majesty is going to come up with $20 million plus the land. Okay? So now, the land. What we do is we get the land under what is called a usufruct agreement, USUFRUCT. Very sort of an unknown kind of a document in the U.S. and Canada. Probably used a little bit in Europe, but mostly in Arabic countries. Comes out of Egyptian law, I believe. And what is it? So it's important to understand what a usufruct is. And the way to understand it, the fastest way, is to think about it as a land lease on steroids with the ability to purchase the land. And I'll get, I mean, for instance, if you had a car, George, and you're my friend, and you say to me, Frank, I'm going to give you a usufruct over this car, you would give me the car. And I would have the right to do anything. I drive it, I have to maintain it. But I can sell it. This is the most unusual part. In a land lease, you can't sell the land. In a usufruct, you can sell the land. So now I can sell the land, but you say to me in your agreement, but Frank, if you sell the car, you don't have to sell it. But if you do, you have to pay me, okay, it's a Mercedes, it's worth $100,000, you have to pay me $10,000. Only after you sell it. And if you don't sell it, you just give it back to me when the usufruct's over. That's the deal with the land. So we have the land at a set price, $68 a square meter. We never have to sell it if we don't want to, but if we sell it, we have to pay the government $68 a square meter. The land is worth a lot.
You got 1 million square meters there, right?
1 million square meters. Yeah. Now, I mean, I must tell you, and this is nothing non-public about this. This is probably the best situated plot of land existing left now in the Sultanates. 6 miles from the airport, on the beach. It's a beautiful location. So it's very valuable land. We'll get it appraised. But to get to the issue of the land now, The government owns the land. First, His Majesty owns the land. He transfers the land to the government with a royal decree that says you can use this land to build the Omagine project, and if you don't, give it back to me. Right.
And that's, if I can interject for a second, that's where sometimes some of the critics don't understand, and I'm glad you clarified that, because a lot of people are saying, what do you mean? The Sultanate just handed over this land to Omagine? Naturally not.
No. Because that's why the development agreement. See, the development agreement controls everything. It controls the usufruct agreement. It controls everything. Because the usufruct agreement says in it the various terms, and one of the terms is you must develop this land in accordance with the development agreement. And then the development agreement, of course. And we filed all these documents. It's another going back to your transparency issues and is it the real deal? My goodness, I just realized, in addition to having just filed the entire development agreement, several years ago we filed the shareholders agreement, which is signed by CCC and signed by the Royal Court of Affairs, which is the personal representative of His Majesty. So these are on file at the SEC. Anybody that's not a believer, all they have to do is click and find it. You know, go through Edgar, you know how that goes. It's very easy to locate these documents. So, but again, people just see the headline, $2.5 billion deal, little company. They suspect, okay, the most modest amount of due diligence will show that it's the real deal. Okay, the land, back to the land. I want to clarify the land.
Sure.
So now, Ministry of Tourism owns the land, and we get a usufruct agreement from the government that says, okay, Mr. Omagine, you have full control of this land. You can develop it in accordance with the development agreement, and you can sell it. And if you ever sell it, you have to pay us 25 reals, which is equal to $68 for every square meter that you sell. Importantly, though, George, to go back to the car analogy, if you give me your Mercedes and say you have to give me $1,000, you don't say to me, you have to give me $1,000 now when I give you this. Go sell the car, and when the person gives you the $100,000, then you give me $1,000. So you're never negative cash. So not only can we sell it, and not only do we have to pay it, we don't have to pay for the land until after we sell it, and until after we receive full payment from the person to whom we sell. So if we get $100,000 for George's car, I've been driving it for a year, and now I go to George and say, George, by the way, I sold the car last week, but I got terms. He's going to pay me 10% every month. So when I get to the 10th payment, George, and I finally get the last dollar payment, then I'll give you your $1,000. That's what you says.
All right, so let me play devil's advocate, because this is where, again, I see some people who don't understand the nature of the deal who chime in and say, why would the Sultan do that at the end of the day? What is it about Frank Drohan or Omagine that makes him that allows him to provide you what sounds like this fantastic gift? Help people understand what the interest is of the entire country of Oman through this at the end of the day.
Well, one thing we know about His Majesty, this guy runs one of the best countries in the Middle East. It's safe, it's politically secure, it's growing. He's done everything right. This is not a foolish man, and it's not because Frank Drohan is so charming. We gave a huge presentation. We did a film. We made a film. We thought this out. We went through. I mean, we had consultants from Hollywood, and we had consultants from engineers, which was kind of fun to see them together. You know, the guys with long hair, very quiet engineers. And anyway, we developed a concept for the project, and then we put together this fabulous proposal, and we went and we presented it to the government, to all the ministers. They were like. They said, do you have this on DVD? Yes. Can we have it? Yes. Here it is. They went that night, showed it to His Majesty, privately. Next day, he said, do it. That was several years ago.
And that's the important part that people need to realize.
By the way, when he said do it,
you're at the end of the day, Omagine LLC is putting all of this together to make this happen for the long-term benefit, which fits into the economic plan of the country of Oman. It's got its 2020 plan where they want to grow tourism and education and culture and all that. And they can't do it themselves, so this is where
Well, they
Omagine
can.
LLC and Omagine comes in, right? This is why this deal has happened. This is why it sounds like, Omagine's
and I must tell you, it didn't happen by accident. Sam Hamdan, who was our #2 guy here, he, speaks Arabic, English, French. He's got 2 MAs and a PhD. He sold his company to Microsoft when he was in his 20s. Brilliant management consultant. So when we started out early, we had the general concept in our head. But we said, let's find out what the Sultanate wants to do. So we went and spent $100,000 and hired a PhD in Arabic history from Lebanon, and we drilled down. We read every speech His Majesty ever made since forever, all the speeches the government people made. We looked at their plans. We said, what is it that drives these people? Because the one thing that we knew in the end, we had to make it a project which would help in the economic development of the nation, and it will. But we also wanted to have the flavors that the country wanted to do, and that was all the cultural and heritage stuff. Because His Majesty, for instance, just built an opera house. It's beautiful. He's very much into high culture, which is very nice. So we want to do high culture, not pop culture, but we want it to be fun. We're not teaching anybody. We're entertaining them and inspiring them and illuminating them. And at the same time, it's driving tourism in. They're spending money in the local economy, and it's creating local employment. And it's making a lot of money for us. So it's, we're doing God's work and making a buck out of it.
All right, part 2 of that question, and then we're going to get to the questions that were posted online from all the shareholders who were gracious enough to get involved in this process. So now so that's the land. Now people should have a very good understanding how the land works. Understanding valuation. So at the end of the day, you've got to pay $68 per square meter, million square meters. So, theoretically, at some point, you're going to have to come up with $68 million after you sold, if you sold, whatever, however this plays out, and we'll talk about that later.
We could do it today, by the way. We could do it today. We could pay them $68 million and we own the land. But why would you do that?
Okay,
why
all
would
right.
you do this? You have the right to buy it at any time and pay them after somebody else pays you. So,
in the meantime, in the press release on October 2nd that you issued, it was an unofficial number, but local real estate people have ballparked the value of this land to be $750 million. Am I correct there?
Not exactly. I think what I said was a minimum of at least 750. I get
right.
Forward.
Yeah, now we always want to take the conservative approach. So you got a minimum of $750 million. So what the investors are asking is, how and when does that hit the books of Omagine, the public company? How does that? What are the mechanisms in place that have to take place between now and then for that to be realized on the books?
This is a brilliant question, by the way. And
I'm a brilliant guy.
Well, you said it came from a shareholder. We have brilliant shareholders, but I take your point. But because we recall the discussion we just had on the usufruct. If I'm not an accountant, but I know the rules about how you book stuff. You book it at lower cost of market. So if you give me your car again for $0, I can't put it on my balance sheet, the Frank Drohan balance sheet, and say it's worth $100,000 because I didn't pay $100,000. But if I pay $50,000 for it, then I book $50,000. So you book it at the lower cost of market value. Now remember, we're not the owners of the land, so we can't book the value of the land as an owner. So I go to Deloitte, who is Deloitte Touche is our auditors in Oman, many years ago now, and I had this discussion with them, and I said, look, my understanding is you have to book something at lower cost of market to own it. So what's the deal with the usufruct and how it works? But we had this extensively long, detailed conversation with our lawyers and with Deloitte, and basically they said, look, it's true you don't own it, but because of the nature of how a usufruct works, what you have is ownership rights over it. So therefore, there is value there. So you have to determine what the value is. So what is the value of Omagine LLC's ownership rights over the land? It's equal to the value of what the land is worth minus $68 million that we eventually will have to pay for it. And I said, can you book that? He said, absolutely yes. I said, sure. Can I ask you another question, Mr. Deloitte, General Partner? Can you book that? And I really drilled down on him. And he insisted he said, what you do is you'll sign the development agreement, then you'll, after the usufruct agreement is registered, we'll get it appraised. The appraiser will come here, we'll agree or not agree, or we'll discuss, we'll come to a number. We'll deduct $68 million from the number. So that's my understanding. And that's the way I've reported it consistently throughout in our filings. But again, because of the nature of the usufruct, it tends to get complicated. But that's so basically when everybody says, when are you going to book the land? Well, the answer is never. What we're going to do is book the value of us getting the rights over the land, and then as we sell it, we'll appreciate it. But even though I make that careful distinction of it's not the land, it's the value of the land, they're virtually the same.
Sure. Yep. For shareholder value at the end of the day, it's the same impact.
So, like God willing, Deloitte partner is right. I imagine he is, and if they sign off on it, that's good with us.
Well,
by the way, even if they didn't have this opinion, and I'm happy they do have this opinion, but even if they didn't, we still have that value. It would appear in a footnote somewhere, I guess.
So let's so we'll end it here, and then because even though I got a ton more questions, I want to move on to what the shareholders had, but to finish that point, so let's assume your minimum your number, it turned out to be 768 million minus the 68 million gives you a net of 700. And Omagine, the public company, would be able to reflect 60% of the 700 million, which my math is 420. So you'd be able to show value, a balance sheet value of $420 million on the books at the end of the day.
This is what our auditors have confirmed to me today, presuming those numbers are correct. Until I see it, I have to make this caveat. Until I see it, I don't believe it, because I'm an old. You book the lower cost of auction. but the interesting thing here, it kind of, I see where they're going, because we didn't get that usufruct rights for free. His Majesty got the stock in LLC in return for it. So it makes sense in a certain way. But it's even though I've lived with it a long time, it's still an odd concept to me. But it is what it is. We're going to value the land, and until we appraise the land, we get an official appraisal stamped by the body authorities, then we'll announce what the value of the land is. And then we'll go to the accountants and book it or not book it, or however that happens. But irrespective of whether it's booked or not, you have that value.
So I've got a lot of more questions, but I don't want to hog the questions. In a demonstration of Omagine's transparency, you're not only here on this video interview, but you've also offered to take questions from shareholders and prospective shareholders who took the time to post these to the official Omagine Investor Relations Forum over on AGORACOM. So let's go through a couple, because there's going to be some natural follow-up questions for what you said.
They've suffered a long time with us, and don't forget this stuff. I'm happy to
the first set, and in no particular order, I think these are chronological, was a username GetIrie. He or she had a couple of questions you've already dealt with. A couple of questions we haven't yet. So when will BNP open a credit line to Omagine?
Well, okay, so here's the misunderstanding. BNP is BNP Paribas, second largest bank in the world. They're not going to open a credit line to us. They are our financial advisor. So if you're going to go and do a project of any scale, especially one of this scale, you go and you hire an investment bank or a banker to be the coordinator of the syndicate or the syndicated loans. You always have to have a leader there. BNP Paribas, if we sign with them, which we think we will, we have a letter of intent with them. We're waiting till the development agreement was signed, which it just was. So now our in-house project finance guy will deal with them. But they don't open a credit line. They go then, Paribas then goes around to Bank Muscat, Citibank, Morgan Stanley, National Bank of Oman, the British and the European banks, and they say, okay, we're going to raise $400 million worth of debt for Omagine. Do you want a piece, Mr. Bank of Deutsche Bank? Do you want a piece? Do you want a piece? And then the banks agree on interest rates and fees and all that kind of stuff. And then they put together the syndicate. Paribas is the leader of that syndicate. It may, by the way, it can elect to participate in the syndicate, or it can just be a fee-based thing where they tell people we're not going to participate, but we're going to lead the syndicate. So they may or they may not. So who gives us the credit line is this syndicated loan transaction. Now, that's the reason you hire someone that's really good is you need someone that's connected to the financial communities, someone that knows about project finance, knows how to negotiate rates, this kind of thing. Two issues I want to say. One is we have on board as a consultant and now coming on as an employee an ex-Lehman Brothers investment banker who was a specialist in banking and real estate. He's the guy that led this effort with us. He's developed a financial model. He negotiated the entire deal with BNP Paribas. You know, I just gave him a nod at my head at the end. Had lunch with him. And the second thing is, their main job is to go around and develop the syndicate that I just described, right? Well, we've already done that. We, through CCC and our own connections, and well, we've got 6 letters from the 6 largest banks in the region. I'm talking National Bank of Qatar, maybe, I don't know. Could be the largest bank in the world now by assets. It's a huge bank. Several Omani banks. We also have a good relationship with Bank Muscat, which is 30% owned by His Majesty. National Bank of Abu Dhabi, the Arab Bank in Jordan and Bahrain. So we have 6. So when Paribas goes to do the syndicate, we said, by the way, here's 6 banks that already want it, are dying to do this deal with us. So they're just delighted. So
all right. So
it's a good project. It's project finance is back. There's an appetite for it here. So we think we're in good shape there. So don't confuse Paribas with your local lender. This is the second largest bank in the world. They're going to lead us into a syndicated loan development. There'll be 7, 8, 9, 10 banks in that syndicate, each with a piece.
As part of the agreement, there were a couple of triggers. So staying with the shareholders' question, what needs to occur to trigger the $70 million payment from RCA Royal Court Affairs to Omagine?
Okay. So now, when you say part of the agreement, so that we're all clear, we're not talking about the development agreement now. Now there's another. The development agreement is between LLC and the government. There's another agreement called the shareholder agreement,
right?
Which is between us, Omagine Inc., His Majesty, and CCC. Okay. Part number 1 of your question is, and I've seen this reported on your board several times. His Majesty is not injecting $70 million. He's injecting $20 million plus the land. CCC is injecting $50 million. So that's where the 70 comes from. It doesn't all come from Royal Court.
Okay.
It comes 50 from CCC, 20 from His Majesty, and His Majesty, of course, does 20 plus the land. So when does it happen? There are triggers. So the shareholder agreement says, okay, we'll form a company, we'll name it Omagine LLC, we'll do whatever the minimum capital was. It was 150,000 reals, $300,000. So we did that. But as part of this agreement, everybody agrees to the following. Zoom. We, Omagine Inc., agreed to put in an additional $600,000. So we'll wind up at the end of the day with $700,000 invested. CCC agreed to put in another $49 million. His Majesty agreed to put in another $20 million and agreed to put in the land. Legally binding, stamped, approved in all courts and official places in Oman. So when do they have to put that money in? And it's always based on one thing, the financing agreement date, which is a defined term in the shareholder agreement. What is the financing agreement date? Financing agreement date is defined as, and by the way, all the stuff that I'm saying, talk about transparency, you can again find this entire shareholder agreement filed as an exhibit in Edgar under our files. Okay, the financing agreement date is defined as that date on which the syndicate of lenders or any lender or any entity or person provides debt financing to Omagine LLC sufficient to do the first phase or any other phase of the project. So what happens, what that means is we sign a development agreement, we go forth and we do a couple things, we put the syndicate together, there's a closing, and they say, okay, you can draw down $10 million to do the first phase, which is design, whatever the number is. The day that happens, these guys have to put their money in. That's the trigger date. I'm sorry, there's one more trigger. With CCC, there's a second trigger. The financing agreement date plus the date that CCC Oman, which is their subsidiary in Oman, 13,000 employees, by the way, just in Oman, CCCS. The date that they signed the contract with Omagine LLC with respect to being the general contractor. So CCC wants to make sure if they're going to invest $50 million, be a partner. Okay, we're willing to do that. We want to get the contract. Okay, fine. Because I wanted them anyway.
Of course.
So that's the trigger mechanism. So, and there's another whole story around that. So I wrote that shareholder agreement, and those words are in there for a reason. I want to advance that trigger. So what do? We did a rights offering years ago. We gave out these warrants. Everybody's wondering, why $5, $10 warrants? What's that about? Well, we'll sign a development agreement. Maybe the stock will take off. Now, everybody exercised their warrants. Omagine Inc. winds up with a lot of money, and we lend $20 million to LLC. That's a financing agreement thing. It doesn't have to be the syndicate.
Pretty smart.
Or we do what we're doing now, which is we're doing a little road show coming up, and we're going to sell a little piece of LLC. This is all disclosed, by the way. I'm not telling you anything that's not in not only in the last registration statement and 10Ks and 10Qs, but for the last 4 or 5 years it's been in there. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to sign a DA. We're going to sell a little piece. We're going to try to accelerate the financing agreement. But it's all blah, 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 blah until something is real. And now it's real. Now we sign a DA. It's off to the races.
And now it's go time. So getting on to the next.
I hope I explained that. Some of these things are quite complicated, George. Just the formula for hitting the trigger dates probably goes on for 2 or 3 pages, just because you have to be extremely precise.
And that's why these kind of video interviews are so helpful at the end of the day, because you do break it down into a layman's explanation. Then people who get the details afterwards go back to your Mercedes. Your Mercedes advertises on TV. They don't give you every technical specification. They give you a really good overview, and then if you're interested in buying the Mercedes, then you go take a look at the specs. Let's go on to the next shareholder question.
Before you say it, just as a point of a disclaimer, I want to say to everybody, can't rely on my description here. You go to the files in the SEC and read the entire document. It's there. Everything is there. So I'm giving the broad brush overview, as George said.
Aland is the next shareholder, and they're asking, do you have, and there's a guarantee you don't have a specific start date, but do you have a ballpark time in which you're hoping to begin construction, which means you got to get financed, you got to get plans drawn up. So there's a process before construction, right? Financing, drawings, approvals. Do you have any ballpark ideas as a team when you'd like to, if everything goes according to schedule, when you'd like to be breaking ground, put your first shovel in the ground?
Well, when we filed the 8K, I'm making this announcement last week, we attached, as I said earlier, the development agreement. If you go to Schedule 7A, B, D, E, and F, you'll see all of the schedules and the construction slate and what gets done when and what the planning is for. Having said that, and I know a lot of people don't want to do that. Having said that, in the general way, here's how it works. You sign a development agreement. For the first 12 months, you have like 18 months to do what's called the master plan. But for the first, you'll probably finish it in 12 months. For the first 12 months, you're worrying about things like the master plan, the environmental stuff, and the financing. So you're doing things in parallel. So there's not a lot of construction going on. But there's what's happening on the CCC side is they're getting on the site, they're mobilizing, they're bringing hundreds and then later thousands of workers as the thing goes on, setting up camps, doing site leveling, doing soil engineering, you do soil testing, check out the dredging. So there's activities in the construction preparing the land, so to speak, for the first kind of year, while the design is going on in parallel. When you get about 30, 40% of the design done, then you can start building stuff. Because the very highly detailed design can carry on later. So first year, you'll see a lot of planning, design, site work. The second year, you'll see some building start. And then the third year, it starts pouring out. And you're still designing all along the way, You're still designing and creating stuff and building, feeding it in. We're not doing anything terribly complicated here. The most complicated structural item probably is the steel structure for the girls, and that's not, the Hayden Planetarium in Europe it's a geodesic dome. What we're doing here that's so complicated is it's so huge. There's so much of it. There's going to be thousands of CCC workers. So our job here is not really technically difficult. It's a management job. It's managing lots of complicated, intertwined processes. And that's why we set it up this way. We went with a big, big company, CCC. We went with a big project manager, program manager company, Baker. Pittsburgh, $600, $700 million a year in sales. Now over $1 billion because they just got purchased. A couple thousand engineers. They're in the business of managing programs for huge billion-dollar projects. So we want to take the operational risk off the table. Are we smart enough to do it? Maybe. We probably are. But why are you going to invent the wheel? You know, you want to get people that really know how to execute. You look around the world and see the work CCC has done. These guys know how to execute. You know, you don't stay in business 65 years doing $5 billion a year unless you know how to execute. Same thing with Baker. So that's why we went with the big partners. You know, not because it wasn't a branding thing. It was we know there's going to be if we're successful in signing this thing, we're going to have to build it. If we're going to build it, we don't want to go out there and start hiring. I mean, I owned a construction company with 300 employees in Libya. I'm here to tell you, and we were successful. But it's a nightmare to manage all these processes. Now we're talking about scale of 30 times that. So you can have a site that's 400, 500, 400, 250 acres, thousands of people. You have to control the processes. And that's why you need somebody that's smart.
I like the fact that people at home should be reassured by the fact that you're using names like Baker, CCC, Deloitte Touche. That speaks a lot to the governance of both the project and the company. And I think I hope people are really, really making note of that. That
is the way that we roll, George. And when
Let's go on to the next questions here from a couple of shareholders. Leb NJB asks, after seeing the write-up in the Observer this morning, so he's talking about the Omani Observer. What kind of publicity have you gotten in the past? How come maybe there hasn't been as much as he or she expected? And what kind of publicity do you expect in the future as far as media coverage goes now that the development agreement has been signed?
Well, it's kind of humorous, actually. It's a good question, but here's the issue. There is a holiday going on right now as we speak called Eid. After Ramadan, there's two holidays, basically, the small Eid and then the large Eid, 60 days later. This is the large Eid. It's like Christmas for people of the Islamic faith. It's a fabulous holiday. Tomorrow, I happen to be in Dubai right now as I'm speaking to you. I came here for a meeting. I'm going to meet with Baker, who has an office in Abu Dhabi. But in Dubai, the holiday lasted 3 days. In Oman, the holiday lasted 8 days. In Saudi Arabia, it lasted 10 days. So why wasn't there any publicity on the day that we signed it? Because the day that we signed it was the day before Eid started, October 2nd. Eid started October 3rd. In Oman, it runs until next Saturday, which I think is the 10th or 11th. Okay. So everybody was focused on getting out of there. And as the gentleman who is the shareholder that you named will gladly testify, we've been waiting a long time with a lot of disappointments for getting this development agreement signed. And when I saw Eid coming up at us, I said, well, I put the pressure on, and I don't care what happens. We're signing this development. Everybody has to leave and go and come and buy presents. Everybody stand still. We're signing this development agreement before Eid. And by the way, it was a challenge, and there was nothing to discuss, or everything was agreed. Anyway, we got it signed at 11 o'clock on October the 2nd, which was about an hour before everybody split for 10 days of vacation.
Well, good for you, because at the end of the day, it's just not easy getting deals of this magnitude done, period.
This is probably the reason why it didn't hit the papers. First, we released it to all of the Middle East wire services. Anybody that wants can call Charlie. He'll send you an email with a list of all of the wire services that have it. I've seen it. You know, it's all over. It's on Iowa. It's in every country in the Middle East. It's all over the U.S. But in the fact that it hit right at the time of the Eid holiday, which is celebrated throughout the Middle East. Everybody's away. I mean, everybody.
Well, if I know anything about PR and the media and all that, there's going to be a lot of time. My gut instinct tells me there's going to be a lot of coverage of this project, not just the initial signing, but everything going forward, because it means so much to the country of Oman and job creation and economic development.
And by the way, George, we're going to drive a lot of that. It's not like we're going to sit around and wait for it to happen. In the past, I think he has said we had some coverage. Excuse me, in the past, and we did, because there were various false starts. So there were coverages in here and there, scattered. Now that it's done, we internally, Omagine Inc. and Omagine LLC, will have a marketing and PR effort going full scale. One of the things I want to do, I think it's a really neat idea, I don't know if the Omani police will let us do it, is I want to put video cameras all over the site. So we have live feeds all the time. So any shareholders interested, we click on and, hey, look at they're pushing the dirt over there, they're building the houses over there. I mean, I think it's a neat kind of a concept.
Well, that's funny because, and this is not arranged, I don't think you do this, but the next question from DeLonghi says, to Frank, first of all, thanks for your vision, patience, and perseverance. And one of their questions was, can you post pictures or videos on the Oman site, either of the signing, but that already took place, I don't know if you took video or pictures, and a detail map of the Omagine site. So if you can actually get those video cameras up and photos, that you hit it dead on nails, and this was not scripted in any way, shape, or form.
Actually, a map of the Omagine site is also attached as one of the schedules to the development agreement. But we can post one on your site on the AGORACOM board, no problem. The thing about
were there any photos or videos taken of the actual signing? Of the actual signing,
no,
the official signing?
He was the minister had to leave quickly for Eid, so we agreed we're gonna. I have to go back next week. I'm here till Saturday. I have a meeting at MOT, Ministry of Tourism in Oman next Sunday, because we have to take the use of work agreement down and get it signed and registered at the Ministry of Housing, which is a different ministry. No big deals, details.
And that was actually the longest question as well.
And the minister said, we'll do the photographs and that stuff after Eid. Okay.
All right. So the agreement was more important. And DeLonghi actually asked that question as well, and I think you just answered it. Did the use of agreement get signed as well? So you're going to sign it and then register with the Ministry of Housing.
Well, no, we're going to sign. The use of agreement did not get signed, to answer the question, but it's not an issue because the use of agreement is incorporated into the development agreement. The development agreement, Schedule 2 to the development agreement, is the use of agreement, and it says in the development agreement, use of agreement is incorporated. You're a lawyer, incorporated by reference herein, and part of this. So the development agreement controls everything. But you actually have to deliver a signed copy to the Ministry of Housing, because everything having to do with land has to be registered with the Ministry of Housing, and you have to pay them a fee. So we have to make 2 or 3 copies of the use of agreement, and I'll sign it, and the minister will sign it. We bring it down to the Ministry of Housing, and then the Ministry of Housing signs it, and then they stamp it, we give them a couple $1,000 fee, and that's how it'll work. But it's a non-issue that it didn't get signed because it's already inside of the development. But it's a clerical thing. It's a bureaucratic thing. It's like registering your deed after you close on your house. You have to do it.
Last question comes from investor PYPR. By the way, Euler 85 had questions. A couple of other people had questions. But because you've covered them already, and as I'm going through these, I'm obviously we don't want to duplicate your answers. So PYPR says, first of all, great job, Frank. Big exclamation marks. They're happy. I like this question.
By the way, as an aside, George, I appreciate all the patience of these shareholders too. I mean, they were long-suffering shareholders, and I'm so delighted that they're all going to do very well. Hopefully. Inshallah, Allah wills it, as we say.
And, anyway, and by the way, everyone's planning a get-together in New York of some kind. So at some point, they're going to ask, when are you going to be back in New York? Because everyone wants to fly in and break bread and have a drink.
I understood that get-together was going to be in Holland, Pennsylvania, at Bill's house, because he's the guy that started this whole thing going. But maybe we have to have it in New York if the Empire State Building.
Hey, wherever it is, I'll show up.
You'll go. I'll have it in Europe. What was the question?
Piper asks, is it possible to post some type of plan flowchart of the construction phases? Which is actually not bad, some that shows, okay, a flowchart. Is that something you'll be able to come up with for shareholders in the near future? It's not immediate concern.
As I said before, look we're building 300 acres of stuff. 2 hotels, probably 3, 7 huge buildings, offices, roads, 2,000 residences. So who's going to come up with this flowchart is Baker. And they don't, we just signed the thing 3 days ago. There is, again, I will say, there's a high high strategy flowchart in the development agreement attached as a schedule of the construction schedule. But we're going to get really detailed stuff. So Baker's going to put this together with CCC. Just doing the flowchart is going to take them. But it's important. So yeah, the stuff will be available. But,
well, I just finished building a house, and I know what the flowchart was like just for that.
Yeah, so you're going to have to build 2,000 of them now, plus a couple of hotels. 10 or 20 miles of roads.
all the infrastructure. So it's probably going to take them.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great. We're so ready for this project.
It'll take them 2 tabs on an Excel spreadsheet, maybe 3, right, Frank?
Actually, there's very sophisticated engineering stuff to do this.
But just the fact that, listen, Frank, that's the end of the questions. I want to thank you on behalf of everyone out there, and now all of you who are watching should know this is why we're planning a series of these, because there's no way we could encapsulate. We gave a 30,000 square foot, the 30,000 foot altitude view of what's happening as we progress through Baker and then through BNP and all the different elements that start falling into place. Then we'll come back and have specific interviews.
There's tons of things, tons of things that I didn't even mention. I mean, the people that we have that are bringing on, these people are incredibly talented people. There's a lot to do, There's a lot to do. We know it. We've had a lot of time to think about what to do, so we're prepared for it, and we're ready to go.
Frank, looking forward to it. I got to tell you, for years we've been trying to get one of these done with you, just one, but rightfully so. You always made the calls to George, until the DA is done, I don't want to talk out of turn. But now I feel like we've turned on the Frank tap, and I'm looking forward to having you again the coming weeks, coming months, over and over and over again. And thank you so much for taking this time. You're in Dubai. It's practically midnight there, and you got the energy of of a 10-year-old on Saturday morning getting ready for the cartoon. It's great to see.
I'm high on Omagine.
You've been watching Frank Drohan. He's President, Chairman, and CEO of Omagine Inc. Trades in the U.S. under the stock symbol OMAG. You can find everything you need about them at omagine.com. Naturally, you can also go look up all their filings, which we encourage all of you to do. And if you want to get together with fellow shareholders and prospective shareholders, then get to the official Omagine Investor Relations Forum on AGORACOM. Get the front page of AGORACOM and just punch in the stock symbol or the company name, and you'll be instantly taking a great conversation with fellow investors. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Frank, thanks again. Have a great week in Dubai, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks a lot, George. Take care. Best to everybody.
Bye.